everyone. Welcome to the Paralyzed Veterans of America workshop for the Abilities Expo. Our workshop today is titled Accessible Home Design, Ramps, Lifts, and Elevators. My name is Mark Thompson. I'm a Senior Associate Director of Architecture for Paralyzed Veterans of America in Washington, D.C., and I will be your presenter today. Let's start off by talking a little bit about PVA history. We were founded in 1946 by a group of World War II veterans who were coming back from war or their service with spinal cord injuries. And they found that not only was the health care for the veterans not very good for their condition, but also even working or living in the United States at the time was difficult. They many times couldn't even get in or out of their house because they were not accessible. So they started PVA to create an advocacy group for their needs. Over the last 75 years, we have expanded our advocacy. We started off really trying to improve healthcare for veterans who have spinal cord injury or disease. And we work with the Veterans Administration and their healthcare network extensively through today. We also do medical research. And we have a full team of staff who works on veteran benefits to make sure that veterans who are injured are getting their full benefits from the VA. We have a government relations or lobbying group that works on Capitol Hill and with government and with VA to improve benefits and make sure that things are being done in the right way for our veterans, but also for disability civil rights. So you don't have to be a veteran to realize the benefits of Paralyzed Veterans of America's work. We do work with the federal government, US federal government, on disability civil rights, including we were one of the main sponsors of the American with Disabilities Acts in the 1990s. We have a full adaptive and recreational sports program where we host tournaments, including the National Wheelchair Games every year. And we do have architects like me on staff. The purpose of having architects on PVA staff is we are the only veteran service organization in the United States with architects on staff. We do a lot of work directly with the VA. We go to each VA SCID center annually to basically do an assessment and a survey of the conditions there to make sure the buildings are working properly for veterans care and for the staff. But we also do a lot of project consulting and support. You can see some photographs here on this slide of projects that we have worked on in association with the design team or with the government who is, or the owner who is building these buildings. We have the Minnesota Vikings football stadium where we improved seating for accessibility and also all the concessions and ways to get around the stadium. The lower left corner is the National World War II Memorial in Washington, D.C., and the four pictures on the right are the Kennedy Center, their most recent expansion called the Reach. We worked on that extensively to make sure the entire facility was accessible. We also work on building codes and standards. We're on very many committees trying to make sure that standards are always up to date and working for accessibility. And we do outreach and education by writing articles or doing presentations like I'm doing today. Today, we're going to talk about two specific chapters in our book that's called Accessible Home Design, Architectural Solutions for the Wheelchair User. We're going to be talking about chapters 2 and 3, which are entering your home from the outside and adding elevators and lifts, both inside and outside. So we're going to get down in some weeds on some of these details, but the entire book really covers every section of your home, from taking on a construction project through accessible kitchens and bathrooms and windows and doors and outdoor spaces. So how do you get started on a project if you have a new injury or a new condition that you need to make your house accessible, or you're building a new house or buying a new house and renovating it? Really what you want to do is make sure that you understand what your daily needs are and what your daily activities are that are unique to you. You need to know what your family size and abilities are, not just your abilities, but your family's abilities if you have children or other adults who live with you or caretakers, so that you design things that not only can work for your needs, but also work for their needs as well. You need to know what's causing roadblocks for you. Can you not get through a door because it's too narrow? Can you not get between rooms because there's one step or two steps? Where do you need to make changes to make your home work better for your specific needs? Obviously, you got to think about finances and budget. And my recommendation in all cases would be to hire an architect. Not just because I'm an architect, but you're going to get some value out of that architect, and this is their expertise. And you really should look for an architect who has some accessibility experience, especially in residential, because not all architects do. Your architect should look at lots of different options. It doesn't cost much money to look at options quickly on paper. And you can do that with your architect to look at renovating existing space, purchasing or renovating, building a new home. What is the most cost-effective way to do something? Even before you buy a house, you can have an architect look at it and do a little bit of an assessment to understand how difficult it might be to make it accessible and to work for you. And of course, then you're going to need to hire a contractor to do the actual construction work at some point in time. So all of these activities need to wrap into your project so that you can get started and work through the project needs. Again, going back to whether you should hire an architect or not, highly recommended. Many times design fees won't cost that much in the grand scheme of a full project. And they're also many times offset by savings in time and money, because architects know how to talk to contractors. They know how to understand your needs and translate those into design solutions that can make things go quicker. And also making sure that you're designing and building correctly the first time. This is one of the best ways to save money, because one thing you don't want to do is build it once, then it doesn't work, and you've got to build it again. So it costs maybe twice as much as the first time you did it. Resale value with an architect, if you've had a good design of your home, may increase the resale value of your house, so that's a positive. And the architect will be your representative throughout the project. As I mentioned, they know language that contractors understand, and they're used to working with contractors collaboratively to get things done and get things done for you correctly. One of the ways in America to look for an architect is to go to the local American Institute of Architects component. We have chapters all over the country. So you can search for that on www.aia.org. And many times the local chapters have a Find an Architect section on their website that you can do that. Or if not, you can contact the chapter itself and they can help guide you through that process. One of the things most important to consider is that the project you're working on, your project, should not be a generic project. So you want to make sure your designer understands that the design should address your specific needs, because every disability, every challenge that everyone has is different. No one has exactly the same conditions. So it's important that it matches your needs. So let's start by talking about entering your home. You can see this gentleman has a very easy entrance to his home. Everything's level. This was a new home that he built, so it was very easy to make that change. It does slope slightly up to that door from the driveway, just to get water away from the door, but it's important to make sure that you can get into your house, obviously. Many times, houses are not built to be accessible. The main floor is typically elevated above ground to protect the wood floor structure from the ground or floodwater damage. Therefore, you may have 2 or 3 steps to get up to the main entrance. So that's a critical issue you're going to have to deal with in trying to get into your home, especially if you're in a wheelchair, but even if you're using a walker or a cane, steps become more difficult. So one of the first things you want to do is just assess the topography limitations. What is the slope of the ground around your home, and how can you use that slope or lack of slope to modify the ground to get to that first level without stairs? One of the things that really is important, as you saw in that photograph of that gentleman in the wheelchair, is to design your driveway, the grade where you're going to park your car, to closely match the level of the main entrance. And you also want to determine, are there going to be multiple entrances to your house? For instance, a main front door, which you may not use that often because you're going to pull your vehicle into the garage and you're going to get out of the car or vehicle in the garage and then go into the house through the garage rather than the front. So you want to make sure that everything's accessible. You can get in multiple ways or get out multiple ways. The easiest and most simple, as I kind of alluded to in the last talk about trying to raise topography, you can see this driveway slopes up to the house, and it's relatively close to the level of the front entrance. And there's another entrance underneath that carport. But what you're doing here is creating a driveway and a parking area that's very close to the main level area. And then you're going to use a sidewalk that has a very minimal slope to get to that main entrance. So there's no steps, there's no stairs, there's no lifts, nothing. It's very close to the same grade. You just want to make sure that walkway surface or sidewalk is firm, stable, and slip resistant so that it's a safe way to walk or in your wheelchair get to the front door of the house. There's also a sloped ramp. This example shows a very minimally sloped ramp. This is only going up about a foot. And it's important to make sure that the slope isn't too steep. Generally speaking, ADA requires the maximum slope on a ramp is 1 in 12. So for every 12 feet you travel horizontally, you can go up 1 foot or less. We would recommend that you make that not even that steep. If you have the space, you can see how long this ramp is just to basically go up a foot or 14 or 16 inches. But don't make it as steep because it'll make it easier for you to, if you're manually wheeling a chair or even a power chair, it'll make it much easier to make the difference between where you park your car or the sidewalk and, in this case, a back deck area. Depending on how far above the ground you are, you may need guardrails and handrails just to be a little safer so you don't roll off or fall off of the ramp. And also if you're using a walker, for instance, or if you have a cane and you have difficulty with your being ambulatory, having a handrail there to rest on or grab can help prevent falls. If the ramp is very long, typically over up to 30 feet, you definitely want to have a level area in the middle of the ramp. You can see here there's a sloped area at the top and then a level area to rest and then a sloped area at the bottom. That also can help you, if you're in a wheelchair, not go too fast down the ramp or go off the end of the ramp because you've gone too far down that slope. As I mentioned before, sometimes in your home, you're actually not going to use the front entrance that often. You're going to go through the garage, and many garages by code are somewhere from 6 to 8 inches below the main level of the house. So you're going to need a way to get up that 1 or 2 steps to get into the house. And you can see here, this gentleman has a very small ramp in his garage. And many times what you'll do is take a 2-car garage and create this ramp near the door to the house so that you're taking a 2-car garage and kind of making it into a 1-car garage. You can pull your car in all the way on one side. You can have about 5 to 8 feet clear to get out of your car or your vehicle in your wheelchair, or make it just, you need to have that space, maneuvering space, especially if you have a ramp that goes out of a van, for instance, down to grade. Sometimes those are 4 feet long, so you need a good 8 feet to be able to get your wheelchair in and out of that. And then you have this ramp, which then allows you to wheel up and down to the house level within the garage. And again, it's a great example here. You're in weather protected area. This looks like it might actually be a carport, but same kind of situation. One other way to do this, and again, it's purely based on your topography around your house. If you have a big level change, for instance, this has a little pond area or creek, sorry about that, pond area or creek that runs in front of the house from between the parking area. You can see the vehicles parked in the distance, a walkway, and then they built a bridge here, which actually can be either level or it can have a little ramp slope surface to it to make that transition so you don't have to deal with a kind of going down and then back up. It's all really on one level or some minimal slope. You definitely want to have guardrails and handrails on this because obviously you can fall off and go much further down since you're going across basically a very shallow ravine here. And the third third way to do this is really to have and this is primarily meant for significant grade changes between your walkway or where you might park your vehicle and the main floor area. You can see these two examples. There's about a 5-step difference on the right and almost a floor on the left, more of a coastal area. And these are mechanical platform lifts. Basically, you roll your wheelchair, you walk onto the lift at the bottom, and you push the button, and it mechanically raises it up to the main level, and then you go off of that, and the same thing in reverse as you're leaving. As you can see, these are exterior pieces of equipment, so they have to be have to be able to handle weather elements, and they do take up some space. In addition, since it is a mechanical system, it does need to be maintained, depending on what kind of climate you live in. If you live in a salt climate, that can be harsh on a mechanical system, or metals such as this. So this can be a little more challenging as far as just mechanical situations, and it's only something you should really use if you have a severe change. I think the coastal situation on the right, where you're raising your home, above a floodplain or something like that, is probably the most common place you're going to use this. If you have, or if you have a very small lot and you need on the right, where you're going up 4 or 5 steps, you just don't have enough room to put a ramp in or change the grade. Because this requires more space, and it also requires electrical and potentially structural expense, it is going to be more costly typically than a ramp or any of the other solutions. And one of the things you need to consider also with these types of equipment is that the equipment can break down. So it could break down halfway through your journey from one level to the other, which can be problematic. You can see on the right, most of these do have a hand crank, but once you're on it, you're not going to be able to access this. And if it does break, you're going to need an alternate accessible entry and exit method from your home. Otherwise, you're going to be trapped. Once you do get up to the main level, you do need to consider entering your home, just making sure the doors don't have significant threshold issues. Many times they will have a threshold, sometimes up to 1.5 inches, vertical chains, just to try to keep water from the exterior. But if it does have that, you're going to have to create some kind of solution similar to what we show here, which is basically a little mini ramp to help get you up over that threshold. If you have the opportunity, it's best to provide weather protection on the exterior roof or a porch roof or something like that, and then be able to have a 0 transition threshold or a very minimal transition that you can wheel across or step across without tripping. Just a very simple consideration at the entrance door. So move on to chapter 3 in our book. Talk a little bit about adding elevators or lifts to your existing home. There's really 3 different types of ways to do this. In these 3 pictures, you have a chair lift on the left, which transverses a stair. You have a platform lift in the center, which kind of goes along the same stair a chair lift will. And you have a home or residential elevator on the right. We'll talk about all 3 and what the advantages and disadvantages of these pieces of equipment are. The chair lift is basically something that you're going to add to an existing stair. It's very cost effective because you're not really modifying anything. You're just adding this and powering it, connecting it to power. They're very cost effective to retrofit over an existing stair, especially if that stair is a very simple configuration. In other words, if it's a straight run of stairs, it's really very easy. If it goes up halfway and then does a 180-degree turn, then you've got to have all those rails to go all the way across if you have no ability to ambulate. And it's a good option really mostly for non-wheelchair users, because one of the problems with this, disadvantages with this type of system, is that if you are in a wheelchair and you need to transfer into the chairlift at the bottom of the stairs, and once you get to the top, you're going to have a second wheelchair at the top. So it does require that if you need a wheelchair. And the other issue here is it does narrow the stair considerably. You can see here it takes about maybe a third of the stair. That seat does fold up when it's not in use, but even when it's not in use, it does take about a third of the stair. So you're restricting the use of that stair if it's a little narrow to begin with for anyone else who lives in the home. And if there is a complex stair configuration, you can see here this stair kind of goes up and then turns 45 degrees. There's many more complicated stairs if they're circular or have some curves to them or go up through a couple landings. It becomes a little more expensive and it becomes much more complex. So the next option is an incline platform lift. And this is much more suited toward a wheelchair user. As you can see in these photographs, there's basically a platform that's the size of your wheelchair that is on the same kind of conveyor rail system that the stair lift is, but you can actually wheel on this at the top of the stairs. And the second picture below shows this woman actually riding the platform lift down the stair. It basically just goes down the stairwell. Therefore, you don't have to have a second wheelchair at the bottom. You just basically roll onto it at the top, transverse the stair down to the lower level, and then roll off at the bottom. Again, this is best for straight run stairs. As you can imagine, trying to get this big platform to turn corners becomes complicated. And many times you need to make sure that you have enough landing space at the top of the stair and at the bottom, because especially at the bottom, you have to be able to have that platform come all the way down to the floor and then have room to get off the platform and turn or maneuver to get out of the stair area. Again, it's a very cost-effective retrofit and a very usable for a wheelchair user. Very safe way to transverse stairs. You can't really fall off of this because it does have guardrails. And it does fold up against the wall when not in use, so it does provide access to the stair if you have family members who do not need to use this platform lift. Disadvantage is, again, it completely restricts the width of the stair. You can see this one is the full width of the stair, and for a typical existing home, that's going to be the case. Stairs usually aren't wider than this wheelchair will require. And as I said before, it does require enlarged landings, especially at the bottom. And you have to make sure that your exterior walls, and because it is mounted to the wall, can support the weight, especially if you have a power wheelchair. Some power wheelchairs can weigh 400 or 500 pounds plus your weight, so it becomes a structural issue. You need to make sure that you can support the stair lift or the platform lift as it supports your chair. Residential elevators are an interesting option. They are becoming more and more popular, and they are the easiest and safest to use because it's just like a commercial elevator. You're enclosed in a space that in the lift, so you can't fall off of it. You can't catch your hand on the railing or anything like that. You're completely enclosed in a little room that's moving between the floors. It can have access to multiple floors, not just 2 floors. With the chairlifts, it becomes a little more problematic trying to go between maybe a basement and a second floor. It just takes more time and it's a little more difficult to make the configuration work. These elevators do vary in weight capacity, size, and cab configurations. For instance, this elevator photograph is designed that it's pretty small elevator, really only the size of a wheelchair, and you actually come in on the back side, on the lower floor or the upper floor, and then you come out the other side. So you're kind of doing a straight shot through the elevator rather than being able to turn around in the elevator and exit on the other side, or having to back out of the elevator on the same side. Elevators definitely add value to your home, not only for anyone with a disability, but as you get older or you need to take groceries from your lower garage level to the kitchen, anything you need to transport within your house, it does add that value. And they're definitely easier to install and design with new construction. In a new construction, you can basically plan where this elevator is going to go much easier. And if you don't need it right away, you can prepare for the elevator by installing the vertical shaft and maybe putting a temporary floor in on the upper level, and then using both spaces initially as a closet or storage space And then as you maybe get older or your injury, spinal cord injury or disease progresses, that you do need the wheelchair, so you do need the elevator, you can always install it later. So it can adapt to your abilities as time changes. Some of the disadvantages, typically this is the most costly option. As you can imagine, you're really making some significant modifications to an existing home. Maybe not so much in a new home. This is relatively cost effective. And there's two significant issues with an elevator in a typical home design. And you can see from this diagram, from a code standpoint, you typically need a little bit of a pit at the lowest level. So you need space below the elevator itself, below the floor. So if you're modifying an existing home, it's very difficult you're going to have to cut out the floor basically below to get that space so the elevator can match the level of the lower floor. And then they also need an overrun space at the top. As you can see from this diagram on the top, you need a little bit of space, and this maybe is a little easier to do depending on where it's located. If you do have attic space, you can cut that ceiling out and create that overrun space. But again, these are much more challenging in renovations, much easier in a new construction. The other issue with elevators that definitely want to point out to you, and you need to talk to your installer or your manufacturer or whoever's selling you the elevator. Residential elevator manufacturers have had an issue that has come to light in the last 20 years or so, and they have not all residential elevator manufacturers have done something about this safety issue. Most of them have an exterior door, which is very similar to just a regular door in your house. And then you have an accordion gate that you have to pull across that's part of the elevator before the elevator will operate. The problem is, in a typical home construction, you have some depth between that door and the accordion gate. And what has happened is many times, not several times, children have used that as a hiding place, or they're just curious and they open that door and they get in between the accordion gate and the exterior door, and there's enough space for them to be there. And if the elevator operates at that time, it can injure them severely. So you want to make sure that your elevator manufacturer or your installer understands that issue. As you can see on the diagram on the right, they basically built out the interior of that door so it has a little more thickness, so that space just doesn't exist, so that a child cannot hide in there and have that injury. The U.S. Consumer Protection Bureau is just working on some solutions to this and sort of forcing the elevator manufacturers to make some changes to address the safety issue, but it's been a long time coming, and I just want to make sure you're aware of that as you get into adding an elevator. Typically, the three options we just showed between a chair lift, a platform lift, and an elevator kind of go, depending on the conditions, again, with the stair layout and things of that nature, but from least cost to most cost, it's typically the chair lift is the least cost, the platform lift is in the middle, and the elevator is the most expensive. But again, if you're building a new home and you know you need to be able to get between two floors, consider an elevator, because it's definitely less expensive and less of an impact on the cost in a new home construction, because you can plan for it. So that's the end of our presentation today. I do want to mention that, again, go back to our Accessible Home Design Architectural Solutions for the Wheelchair User. If this is a book you're interested in purchasing, here's the information. You can call 1-800-424-8200 or 202-416-7645 if you want to purchase that, or you can email us at pvaarchitecture@pva.org. The price point is $9.99 for a PVA member and $16.99 for non-members. And again, this book goes from entering your home to outdoor spaces and everything in between as far as accessibility. I also want to mention that one of our missions at Paralyzed Veterans of America is we do provide technical assistance, and to not just members, but anyone. If you're building a new home or doing some renovations, you can send us your drawings that your architect or your builder have created, and we'd be happy to review those drawings and make suggestions to improve accessibility throughout the home, whether it's just a bathroom renovation or you're building a new home, anything in between. Please take advantage of this. You can email me directly or use the PVA architecture at pva.org to reach out. And we'd be happy to do that, to give you review comments and help you make your home more accessible and more usable for you. So that, again, that ends our presentation today. There is going to be a question and answer session directly after we're finished here, and I will be live available to answer your questions based on this workshop. So thank you very much. We really appreciate it, and have a good day.
Mark, we really enjoyed that workshop. And as you can tell, Mark, we have a lot of questions. So let's get to it. Right. How you doing today, Mark?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Good. Good to see you again. All right. So
good to see you too.
Here's the first question. What is the weight limit for a platform lift? I know that was directed towards me because I'm kind of large and in charge, Mark. So what's the weight limit, my friend?
I'm not 100% sure. You're going to have to check with your manufacturer on exactly which piece of equipment you're getting, but they are strong enough to support a power wheelchair and you. So they definitely are in the hundreds of pounds type of capacity. I would say the biggest issue there is just like I said in the presentation, is to make sure, because it does need to be mounted to the adjacent wall, the track does, to make sure that that wall is structurally sound enough to support the mechanism and your wheelchair and you.
All right. Well said, my friend. So next question. How high can a vertical platform lift go?
A vertical platform lift, generally, we're talking about 10 to 12 feet as a maximum limit. I'm sure they can be extended beyond that, but you're probably getting into some significant cost increases to make it a little more custom. I would definitely want to make sure it's not more than 12 feet vertically.
All right. All right. Sounds good. All right. Here's another one, Mark. Are there funding grants available?
There are, depends on your situation. We deal a lot with veterans, obviously, as Paralyzed Veterans of America, and the VA does have some housing grants, adaptive housing grants for veterans that you can qualify if you are a veteran. I would, if you're not a veteran and you're in your community, I would definitely go to your community housing authority, or maybe the city or local municipality might have a grant that they can provide in your area directly to assist you with making your home more accessible.
Okay. And Mark, this question kind of goes with the question I just asked, and that was, how can you reduce cost of a lift?
I think again, it kind of comes down to, if you're building a new home, there's ways you can do that by simplifying the stair design, so that a lift, either a chair lift or a platform lift, don't have to turn corners. Basically trying to make that stair as straight as possible will help reduce the cost quite a bit. And if you're using an elevator, then definitely that's less expensive in a new home, because you can plan for it, the pit below and the overrun above, and make the space adaptive. So you're not in an existing home, the elevator is going to be a lot more expensive than in a new home, just because you have to cut holes in floors and probably modify some walls and maybe even the ceiling structure and the floor structure to make that work.
Awesome. I don't know, Mark, you and I had this conversation before. Now, when it comes to getting an elevator, do you have to worry about dust, maintenance, and things like that? And they're just not as, you won't have a longevity issue with elevators.
I think the elevator, there is definitely maintenance required for an elevator, probably more than for any of the other kinds of lifts, just because, and it's a little more complicated because it's a lot of it's hidden in the elevator shaft itself. Typically with a home elevator, there is a separate piece of equipment that you need to have an elevator equipment room for, whether it's a hydraulic pump that's pushing the elevator up and down. or there's definitely extra electrical equipment. So that's the primary point of maintenance, is that equipment room, and the equipment, the pump that's in there, the controls and things like that. But elevators, if you've been in commercial elevators, you see that they're inspected regularly. You should definitely have your home elevator inspected by your installer or someone who does that in your area, just to make sure everything's functioning properly. The worst thing that can happen to you is to get trapped in that elevator because something breaks down or it's not functioning properly.
Awesome. And Mark, if money was no object, could a person get an elevator like in Captain Picard's Starship Enterprise? Is that possible?
When money's no object, you can do anything, Paul. Absolutely.
Sounds good. Well, I'm gonna see if Lou and David can loan me some so I can get an elevator. Okay, Mark. Here's the next question right here. Um, are stationary ramps better than movable ramps?
I think stationary ramps are definitely better. Just a permanent construction is more stable typically. It's going to have less chance of breaking or failing than a temporary ramp. If you have to move a temporary ramp around and install it in different places, or you get the installer there and something can happen to a temporary ramp if it's not properly anchored. Permanent ramps are permanent construction, so they should be much more stable and long lasting than a temporary ramp.
Okay, sounds good. Here's another one, Mark. What are some of the differences between a modular ramp and a wooden ramp?
I'm not sure exactly what the modular ramp is, but if that's like a pre-manufactured ramp that you just install, sort of like a temporary ramp, the biggest difference is the permanent wooden ramp you can design to meet your needs exactly, where the modular ramp may have limitations. It might be too steep, it might not fit your exact scenario or your situation. So I think it all depends on what your situation is. If you only need to raise from the sidewalk to your front door, maybe 6 or 12 inches, then a modular or temporary ramp might work better, and be less expensive. But the permanent ramp is generally the better solution, or wooden ramp of that nature. The other thing I would say about, kind of go back to the last question too, is temporary versus permanent, is should probably think about matching your installation to your situation. If you're temporarily injured and it's causing you not to be ambulatory, the temporary ramp may make more sense because it's less expensive. It can be removed easily, excuse me. But if your condition is more permanent, then the permanent ramp probably makes more sense, just because it's going to last longer and be
Okay,
more stable.
sounds good. And next question has to do with stairway width. Is there a minimum stairway width needed for a platform lift?
Well, it really is based on the size of a wheelchair. So you can measure your own wheelchair to determine what your minimum width is for that platform. But typically 32 inches wide and 48 inches deep is the standard sort of footprint of a wheelchair and what you need for accessibility. So I would say you don't really want your stair to be any less than 36 inches for that platform lift to really work
Okay,
if you're using a wheelchair.
awesome. Next question comes from if a person is a renter or not. They were saying if you're renting, you can't put anything permanent um, there, but what are the options? Are the laws in place now when landlords rent to people who are disabled now, they have to offer access?
They don't necessarily have to offer access just because they're renting to someone who's disabled, but if you're building new construction now, in residential construction that's multifamily, so a rental type property that has multiple units, some of those units are required to be accessible. So if you're moving or you're looking for an accessible apartment or condominium somewhere to rent, then you should definitely ask and inquire about that if they do have accessible units in the building and if they're available for rent at that time. Otherwise, I don't think that You could force a landlord to make an apartment or rental unit accessible when it's not now. I don't think that's really going to be a strong argument. If you can go find accessible housing somewhere else, it's probably a better choice. Many landlords will work with you though for temporary conditions. If you're injured and you expect to recover and be able to not need a ramp or whatever other kind of amenities you need to make the unit more accessible. I think you just started off with the discussion and see how that goes.
Okay, and if not, probably just getting a portable ramp, right, to put into
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sounds good. All right, Mark, you got a lot of questions, my friend. So I'm gonna keep firing at you. All right.
Okay.
All right. So here's another one. How can you keep snow or ice off outdoor ramps and lifts?
Well, I think definitely I have a couple answers to that. The first one is on a lift. I would definitely recommend if you're installing a lift that you put a roof over the top of it. Like if it goes up through a porch or if there's some way you can extend a roof over that. A good example of that would be if you have a home that has, a 12-inch difference between where you park your car and a carport and the house level that you install the lift in the carport so that it's weather protected. That's probably the simplest way to do it. On a ramp, it gets a little more difficult, obviously, because you trying to put a roofing structure over a ramp becomes quite expensive because of depending on the length of the ramp. So that's a little more difficult. I think if you want to, one thing that can certainly help weather protect a ramp is if it's sloped and it has, if it's a wooden structure and it has openings between the wood flooring boards, at least some of the moisture is going to go down through that structure so it will not pile up on that structure. It doesn't prevent it from icing necessarily or getting slippery, but that's one way to do it. The other way to do it, which again can be expensive, is you can heat the ramp. For instance, if it's a concrete ramp, you could put heating coils or something in the concrete so that it does warm that ramp so that, above a certain point, maybe between 15 degrees and freezing temperature, it would melt snow or ice and keep it and even dry it. It will evaporate all that moisture in certain conditions. So those are some of the options.
Okay. Sounds good. A lot of questions, Mark, about the book. About can you let them know where to get the book at again?
Okay, so really the best way to do it is to email us your interest in purchasing the book at pvaarchitecture at pva.org. So it's pvaarchitecture at pva.org. And if you just send us an email, tell us whether you're a member of PVA or not a member, and ask us that, just tell us you want to purchase the book. We will get right back to you and arrange for you to purchase the book directly from us.
Awesome. Thanks, Mark. Here's another one. Are there elevators that don't require an equipment room?
I don't know the answer to that 100%. So I don't want to say yes or no just because I'm not 100% sure. I haven't investigated every manufacturer. The majority of them do require a small equipment room just for that. It's really a pump. They're mostly hydraulic elevators. So they do, especially residentially, typically only going one floor. So they're basically have a piston that pushes the elevator cab up and down. And you need a hydraulic pump for that. So somewhere you're going to have a space for that.
Okay, sounds good. And I think I know the reason why David and Lou haven't bought me my elevator yet with this question right here. What happens to an elevator when there's a power outage?
You should definitely make sure that you have a generator because that can power that elevator because you do not want to get stuck in it. Typically, what will happen is if there is an emergency or a power outage, if it is connected to the right systems in your home, that it will take you down to the lowest floor, or you can actually program it probably to take it to any floor you want it to in that situation. And it will stay at that floor until the power resumes. So you can at least exit, get off the elevator if that happens.
All right. Yeah, that's something we really need to make sure we have an escape plan. Was that right, Mark?
Absolutely, absolutely.
And you imagine that, the
I
power
mean,
outage?
it's a little better in a home elevator just because you have the accordion door that you can actually function yourself. In a commercial elevator, the doors, if you get stuck between floors, you obviously can't open the doors. If it goes to one floor and the doors don't open, you can't open them yourself, like, you know,
Yeah,
like you can a residential elevator. So,
absolutely. And Mark, when we look at just how innovation has improved over the years, how has that really helped with the architectural, I guess, roadblocks that comes up when ones want to have like specific things made in their house because of accessibility issues?
well, I think the good news is that we're 30 years since ADA has passed, and so that we have, as a society, we do have equipment, systems, ramps. Everybody's used to constructing these things now, these accommodations. And while ADA doesn't apply to a single family residence, any place you go to buy an appliance or kitchen cabinetry, they've all adjusted their standards so that they are accessible because they serve both commercial and residential typically. So I think that's good news from a technological standpoint. This is going beyond ramps and how to enter your home, but obviously home automation has made a huge difference when you can voice command, turning the lights on, turning the lights off, turning your TV on, changing the channels, opening doors, you know, answering the phone, doing your security system totally hands-free and without even moving. You can do it at night. You can lock your doors when you lay down, go to sleep. Oh, I forgot to lock the doors. You tell your Alexa or any other device, I'm not advertising for Alexa here, but that's what I have. And you just tell it to lock the doors and you're safe and sound in your home. So that, I think that's probably the biggest technological advance from an accessibility standpoint that's really helped out a lot.
Yeah, man, tell me about it, because I remember it's been 28 years for me since I've been a wheelchair user, and some of the things that I have seen in the strides with
Mhm.
great organizations like what you guys are doing over there at PVA, helping and educate us. It's really priceless. It's invaluable, you know, because we really didn't have that
Right.
28 years ago. All the things, so we really appreciate what you guys are doing.
It's really, I mean, the accessibility functions and amenities have just become more commonplace over the 30 years, which is, we knew it would take some time because we have a huge built environment, but and now it's just commonplace. I think in the beginning, in my career, there were owners who were like, why do I have to do that? I don't want to
Yeah,
do that. And now everybody just knows it's part of our society. It's part of our built environment and the way things are done.
that's true. And
So,
what I found out too is that when it becomes easier for us, part of the disabled community, it becomes easier for all. And then they want to
right.
adapt it to like, oh yeah, this is nice. I can do this now. Wide enough doorways where you can bring stuff
Yeah.
in, a lot of groceries and ramps where you can walk up and everything.
Yeah. I think one of the best examples of that is when you travel and you're wheeling your suitcase, or you have your child in a stroller, it's a lot easier to go up a ramp than take them down a stairs, right?
Tell me
So
about
it's
it.
benefited everybody. It's really benefited all of us. So
Tell me about it. And also, if you had a little bit too much fun at happy hour, it's fun to walk down a ramp, then stumble downstairs. Last
absolutely.
last question, Mark. This has to do with ramps for threshold changes. So I'm not sure what the question was, but just ramps for threshold changes, doorways.
Okay. So we showed the one picture in the kind of after the ramp section of that doorway that had a threshold. I mean, thresholds on exterior doors are very important because they typically seal the door at the bottom and help keep water out so you don't have any infiltration at the bottom. Plus, obviously, makes a sounder seal from a weather, heat and cold standpoint as far as intrusion of the exterior temperature into your home and reducing the load on your heating or cooling system. But they do cause problems, obviously, for wheelchairs. Typically, if they're only about half an inch vertical change, you can get over them in a wheelchair, especially a power wheelchair, pretty easily. But creating a small slope around that still provides the weather protection, because really that threshold is creating a situation at the bottom of the door where they interact, where they come together so that they're sealed. You can't really do that on a flat surface. So raising that up to half an inch or 3/4 of an inch that's what gives you the seal. But if you put a ramp on both sides of it, which only has to be about a foot long, even less than that, to give you that slope on both sides, it makes it just an easier transition to wheel across.
Yeah.
It does have some help too for someone who's using a walker or with a cane. It gives you that a little more warning that there's a change in elevation and a change, something that could trip you. So it works both ways.
Yeah, and those thresholds ramps are amazing, because I have a transit bolt on the bottom of my chair,
Mhm.
and if I just try to roll over it, a threshold, Mark, I'm gonna send you a picture of what I did to my house with my threshold. Man, it's like it got
Yeah.
mutilated by Magneto himself. If you saw it, I mean, it was just like, so those
Yeah.
threshold ramps are really, really amazing to help that
Yeah.
out
Yeah.
as well too.
And absolutely, in the inside of your house, don't put any thresholds in. Lots of times,
Yeah,
builders will put a threshold in between the bathroom and an adjacent wood floor or something, trying to make up that difference. Tell
yeah,
them we need that. You need that flush, and
absolutely.
make sure that it's a flush condition.
Yeah, if I show them what I did to mine, they'll probably say, yes, yes, let's definitely do it. Mark, it's been awesome chatting with you again. You want to give that information again, how ones can contact the PVA, and
Sure.
also some of the great things you guys have as far as resources over there?
Right. So if you're interested in the book, please email us at Pete. I'm sorry. I'll start over.
Take two and action. I'm
Here
just
we go. Email us at PVA architecture at pva.org.
awesome.
Or we also have our technical assistance service, which is open to anyone. If you're building a new home, you're doing renovations, you have drawings, you can send us the drawings. We'll look through the drawings and give you any recommendations that we have, or suggestions that we have to make your house more accessible. You can do that by emailing that same address, or you can email me personally at mark, M-A-R-K-T, at pva.org.
Awesome, Mark. Thank you so much for all that you do. Thank you for your service, and really appreciate all the great things that PVA do for veterans over there. And shout out to Darlene and Andrea, who are ASL interpreters, and Karen, our captioner. Thank you all for making this presentation so amazing. And Mark, thank you again. Look forward to catching up with you soon, Mark.
Absolutely, Paul. Thank you. And thank you to Abilities Expo and Virtual Abilities Expo for getting us all together. Really appreciate it.
Awesome. Sounds good. So, hey, we're going to take a little break right here. We're going to take a pause for the cause. Come back at the top of the hour. We're going to do some movement and some exercise. And if there's some music there, we'll see if we can get Darlene and Andrea and Karen to dance with us as we're doing our workout and everything. So go check out all the great exhibitors that we have over there. Tag us in the post, take a picture of us. We'll give a shout out. We're giving shout outs like Oprah used to give away cars. So please enjoy yourself at the Abilities Virtual Experience number 3. We'll be back right after these messages.